Hi, and welcome to Mediatwits number 171. I'm Mark Glazer, Executive Editor and Publisher of Media Shift. This week we'll be talking about valuations gone wild in the media space, with Vox and Vice and BuzzFeed all becoming unicorns worth $1 billion plus. Vox and BuzzFeed getting investments from NBC Universal of $200 million, pushing them over those billion-dollar marks. Question is, are they really worth it, and are we hitting a bubble when it comes to digital media startups? So before we get into our discussion, a word from our sponsor. Running your own business requires focus, and so does parenting. Mediatwits podcast sponsor NextSpace created a place where parents could give their best quality of attention to both co-working space and childcare space under one roof. Learn more at nextspace.us/nextkids. We also have great news for podcasting fans. MediaShift is producing Collab Space Workshop in San Francisco this Saturday at KQED with a focus on podcasting and audio innovation. Sponsored by the Donald W. Reynolds Journalism Institute, CollabSpace will include a keynote from Steve Henn of Planet Money and NPR. Learn more at bit.ly/collabsf and use the Collab20 code for 20% off your entry fee at CollabSpace this Saturday. So I want to first, when we get into our discussion, before we get into it, I want to introduce our panel. We have Alex Weprin from Politico in New York, Andrew Lee at American University in D.C., and Eunice Shin at Manat Digital Media. So it's pretty interesting to see what's been going on lately. This year has been definitely the year of big investments in some of these kind of media startups that have been around for a while. It's hard to really call them startups, but now, you know, BuzzFeed is valued at $1.5 billion, Vice at $2.5 billion, Vox at about $1 billion, and Vice, you know, got a investment of $250 million from A&E Networks, and a BuzzFeed and Vox investment from NBC Universal, part of Comcast. So there's obviously interest in kind of old line broadcast companies in these kind of digital native startups, and vice versa. Those startups are obviously interested in getting into the TV space. Eunice, I'm curious, how do you justify these kinds of large valuations?
I think that the main focus of it right now is about the consuming audience. And what we've been seeing in the digital media space and the overall media and entertainment space is that audiences are shifting, and the way that they consume content is changing. And for some of these larger media and entertainment companies who are very much used to their traditional models and their traditional monetization of content, it's something that's not native to the way that they produce content and distribute content and have an end relationship with the consumer, right? If you look back into the ways that film and TV and home entertainment's always been, they've never really had that end relationship with the consumer. It was always through a retailer or an exhibitor or a broadcaster or a cable company. And so for the first time, now content is being consumed and engaged with audiences on a one-to-one level, and that's something that larger media and entertainment companies are challenged to do. So a company like Vice, BuzzFeed, Vox, where they are consuming directly with the end consumer, understanding what content resonates where, on which platforms, and understanding how content is consumed is something that is very valuable. And it's something that for a larger company to organically develop within themselves, and I hate to use the word authentic because it's used so often in this digital media space, but it's inauthentic to them. And so going and acquiring, and since they have the cash, going out and acquiring and investing in companies who do that really well, it's probably one of the smartest ways that they can move.
So for you, it's not necessarily just about right now it seems like these companies, their business model is advertising. They're not really selling anything. It's not paid content. It's generally, you know, native advertising on BuzzFeed. Vox is just kind of display ads, and they're going into native. But you're talking about something totally different, which is they understand their audience, they've got data on their audience. So this is more about what understanding the audience. Where does that fit into the business?
Well, it absolutely fits into the business because that's where they're positioning for the future. Right, they're absolutely positioned for the future. If you look at BuzzFeed, they were a profitable company. They've made quite a bit of money in doing what they do. Does it compare to one single film that NBCU will come out with? No. The margins and the scale of revenue is very different. However, the ability to reach a vast audience immediately and in a meaningful, relevant way is something that these larger entertainment companies cannot do. And so really it's about being smart, getting smarter, about understanding digital media distribution, understanding the end consumer and consumption behaviors, and it's just about getting smarter and positioning themselves for the future. It's not about influx of revenue in the early set. Certainly not now, and perhaps 5 years from now, right? I don't think anyone would have predicted the trajectory of where things are today 5 years ago. Not at the speed it's gone and changed just in the short past 2 years. So much has happened. And I think in 5 years from now, NBCU does not know, and the other larger media entertainment companies do not know where they're going to be. So they're trying to position themselves for that.
Yeah, Alex, what's your take? I mean, do you believe these valuations mean something, or is it really just kind of a bet on the future and a hope that they will turn into something that they're not right now?
I think to a certain extent it is a bet on the future. I think all these companies have expressed interest in going to television, to either own their own television networks in the case of Vice, or produce programs for television in the case of Vox and BuzzFeed. And I think the valuations, in part, take that into account, because right now, a single TV show has the potential to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to a company. And a channel, I mean, look at Current TV, which was a channel that was not watched by many people and had a website that had very few visitors. It sold for $500 million simply because the current cable television ecosystem supported that. Now, the ecosystem could end up facing troubles down the line in the medium term and certainly in the long term. But for now, there's a lot of revenue to be derived there. And so I think these companies are interested in exploring that, and I think the valuations reflect that.
I mean, do you think this is something also kind of as a hedge by NBC Universal against possible, and Comcast obviously is the parent company, a hedge against what's happening with the bundle and people not getting into cable as much? Is this kind of like, well, let's try something else to make sure we're kind of hedging in a way?
Absolutely, I do. I also think it's a hedge on the part of Comcast, on the part of Fox, on the part of these legacy companies that are investing in them, because I think they know that the future is going to change, and they don't entirely know how. But these companies, Vice, Vox, BuzzFeed, they seem to have a pretty good grasp of what's going on. So just in case things change too much, they want to be invested there. Mm-hmm. And I think they can learn from both the legacy companies can learn from these startups, and these startups can learn some stuff from the legacy companies too.
Yeah, and one of those things is getting onto TV, like Eunice is saying. This is something that, maybe in the early days of BuzzFeed they were thinking, we're a new kind of media company, but now, obviously there is something to learn and something to gain by being part of the TV bundle still.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I think that the ability that for BuzzFeed and these other companies to gain the ability to upstream, right, and to enter the traditional markets, these same people that are digital native stars want to be TV stars and movie stars, right? It's the world's coming together, and in kind of a perfect sense, it's being able to reach all audiences on every platform, cross-platform, cross-media, and being able to have a robust media and entertainment company in order to do that. I think that is the future. I don't think films are ever going to go away. I don't think TV's ever going to go away. I think models are changing, but certainly it's about getting onto the platforms where people are consuming content.
Yeah. And Andrew, what do you think? I mean, you just spent some time in San Francisco. Did you get the feeling that there's a bubble happening in Silicon Valley and now in digital media that's stretching into these areas, or do you think there is some there to these kinds of valuations?
Well, obviously I'm wrong, because just a few months ago I said, yes, there's a bubble. I don't know how much bigger it can get. And if you look at the stories from last year about Vox and BuzzFeed, we're talking like 300 million, 500 million. Now we're talking $1 billion, $2.5 billion. So it's mushroomed compared to where we were talking about these companies last time. I mean, but as Eunice was talking about, it's really a lot about the trajectory, right? If you just compare the news of the latest 24, 48 hours of National Geographic, right, being acquired by, I want to say the magazine and the TV side of things being acquired by Fox for, $725 million for 73%. So you're roughly talking about $1 billion company for Nat Geo, 100 years old, pretty much the venerable, scientific publication that the general public knows about. I mean, it's amazing to think that...
Well, that's a lot more than the Washington Post got, what, $250 million?
That's true.
That was a high valuation for an old media company.
Yeah, and if you look at the revenues of Nat Geo, it's $500 million in revenue. That's nothing to sneeze at. But on the other hand, look at the trajectory of that, of the magazine, of the what they're weighed down by in terms of print distribution. And if you look at that, I guess it makes sense that Fox probably knows how to do what's right for a middle-aged white male audience that's getting older and not sure what to do with a younger crowd. So in that sense, BuzzFeed, Vox, and Vice are this vibrant, younger side of things that these companies obviously want to tap into. And as you said, I think it is this kind of looking at these as a hedge for a younger audience. I'll never forget when I was in the 1990s when I was visiting Viacom for a business meeting, and the elevator opened up on the MTV floor, and it was just bizarre because every other floor was just a normal office building floor, and you open it up and just crazy, teenagers running back and forth, and there was bright colors and everything, and that's kind of what I think is the equivalent of like BuzzFeed, Vice, and Vox. These are kind of the new energy that these companies think they can buy into to inject some kind of vigor into their approach. And then it's something that you see if you've ever talked to Vox or seen some of their approaches to things. They call themselves kind of like a news hacker, almost like a collective. This is the kind of culture I think a lot of these companies are looking to tap into.
Well, and that's an interesting point, though, Andrew, because integration is going to be the biggest challenge. So you can have the cash to go out and make these acquisitions and investments, but integrating it in a very smart, impactful way is going to be a huge challenge. The way that the executives on both sides of the camp think very different, right? And just and fundamentally it comes down to the value of content, right? You have one world that's never given away content for free. You have to pay a premium for content. And then on the flip side, you have a world where content is free. And you want to get that out there, and it's about doing it in a way and kind of building an audience and then thinking that the monetization will come. There's some fundamental differences in the way that they operate and think, so the integration is going to be a huge factor. And if you look at the Disney and Maker Studios acquisition and the integration challenges they've been having there, a lot of great wins in that, but a lot of challenges as well. So it's going to be, it's not over just by making this acquisition and investment. They have a lot of work to do to make that money work for them.
Do you think this is leading to an acquisition? I mean, do you think that might be what's going to happen down the line? I mean, there was a story kind of saying, well, what is the end game of BuzzFeed and Vox and all these different companies? And do you think, would it fit at NBC Universal, Eunice, or do you think it would be very difficult? Like you're talking about integration. Well, if you're going to buy it, will that work?
I think that for a lot of these media and entertainment companies, they first started off by investing and just getting to know and learning. And I think once they see successes there, I think that they will then make a move towards acquisition. It's interesting, if you look at Warner Brothers and Machinima, they've had every opportunity to kind of go in and put more money in. They've put more money in from an investment standpoint, but they've held back from an acquisition. And there's been specific reasons why they've done that. But if you look at at Style Hall and RTL, they were initial investors, and then they went in and acquired. So I think once they see, because it's still new to them, it's really, as to us, it seems, and to I think a lot of the world, that it's very easy to understand. In this traditional system of a media and entertainment company, it's still foreign, and it's still something that's not quite as familiar. So there's a level of getting to know them better, understanding the dynamics of how they operate, and learning as much as they can. And I think if they like what they see, then I think it's towards that. I also think for Vice, though, it's a very different. I have a different opinion about Vice.
You think they're more IPO possible, or?
I think Shane Smith is after the biggest dollar possible. And I think if you take a look at the way that he's looking at, and he's a fantastic marketer. I mean, if for anything, he's been an amazing person to put in front of executives and get executives to give him money, and that's what he's done incredibly well. And it's not an easy feat, but if you look at the way he operates and runs the company, it's a different element of that. So I think that Vice is a really, really interesting company. I think it's very overvalued, but I think they're smart. I mean, I think that I think he's marketed his way in a brilliant way. And for that, maybe there's a value to that.
And they also have the deal with HBO. They already are on TV. I mean, they will have a network, but I mean, they're taking steps that's way past what these others have done.
They have a deal with 20th Century Fox to put out films every year. They have a deal with Live Nation and have music, and they're really stretching their wings. And I think that with all the cash that they've been getting in, they've been able to do that and experiment. And so it's a fascinating company to me. I think Vice is an amazing company, important company to look at. Are they bringing in the money that values kind of, and even do they have the potential for where they're valued at? It's pretty questionable, but I think that they're a fascinating company to take a look at, and the leadership there is going to really dictate what happens.
Alex, you want to jump in and say something?
Yeah, well, I was going to say Vice made, Vice has they're getting their own television channel in Canada in partnership with, I believe, Rogers next year. What they do very cleverly is they take things that air on the internet here in the U.S. on their website, they repackage them and sell them as TV shows in Eastern Europe and South America and Asia. So they are very smart with the way they package content and reuse it and sell it all over the world. And they are making an effort to be on cable systems, to be on HBO, to be on HBO Now, to be free on the internet, to be on YouTube. I think they're much farther along in that respect than some of their competitors.
Yeah, Andrew, you had a thought about Vice as well.
Yeah, I mean, I teach undergrads and grad students all the time in journalism and video journalism, and Vice is very much at the front of the conversation when they say, what inspires them and what kind of style or what kind of stories people want to do. So, it's amazing how much money they raise compared to how big or not big their audience is. It's really out of whack. So hats off to those folks who can do that. I think the big scary thing for BuzzFeed that a lot of people are talking about is how dependent they are on Facebook, perhaps. They could be subject to the Zynga effect, right, of having so much dependent on the plumbing of Facebook, so that if Facebook decides to turn the throttle off or tweak their algorithm, suddenly BuzzFeed stuff doesn't become as buzzworthy anymore. So that's the fearful thing for BuzzFeed. And then for Vox, it's one of those things where they're so funky and weird that if they ever got acquired or their culture feels like it's being pressed on by a larger corporate parent, I could easily see half the team just leaving and doing something else. I mean, their team basically was left the Washington Post to do what they're doing now. So there is always that problem of, can you keep that team together and keep the magic happening once they get acquired?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think, Eunice, about these other kind of digital-only startups like Business Insider and Mike and Refinery 29? I mean, they're all getting some funding. Do you think there's potential for those others as well?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing that we do is we work with the larger media and entertainment companies in scouting out these newer companies to partner with and invest in. And then on the flip side, we work with these digital-first content companies in trying to figure out how they want to find partnerships in some of the bigger players. Absolutely, these worlds are coming together. This is the thing that fascinates me, because I've been in the media and entertainment industry for about 20 years, where for the most part you have these major conglomerates ruling the way that the ecosystem works. In today's world, it's completely changed. It's an ecosystem of collaboration, which I love. I think it's fascinating, and I think it opens up so many new opportunities for new players. And I think that video is number one driving, and even if you looked at BuzzFeed before, they're pretty much like the list, it was really text-based, and they went to GIFs, and images, and now the majority of what they're doing is putting out video, because video is what's resonating and it's what's capturing more audiences. So these online publishers who are coming out with content, and like a Refinery 29, they're coming out more and more with video, so I think it makes it really interesting in that way. But absolutely, I see these worlds coming together. I see more investment coming in. I see But I think that because there's a greater attention on it, that these companies, these digital-first companies, have to be really smart in how they differentiate themselves, how they position themselves. And then as these larger media entertainment companies look to invest, they really need to understand, because Vice is sexy and all that, is that the right company I want to put my money in? Or does it help me? And what's my end goal? Is my end goal just to make news and say to my shareholders, I'm digital, because I'm putting my money there? Or are they really looking at it from a strategic way? By the way, a lot of them are doing that though, right? Or are they really being strategic and thinking about what's going to make sense for the way that we do our business and what's authentic to what we do and to our ethos and how we can integrate? Integration is huge, and I think that's the next thing we're going to be talking about next year, and how these companies are integrating effectively. You can't just slap a BuzzFeed sticker on an NBC newscast and make it BuzzFeed. It's just not going to work.
Good point. And what about, you talk about video. It seems like that's just, everyone's talking about video. Pretty much every site has to have some sort of video strategy. Alex, do you think that there's too much video now? Can every site have its own, video plus TV channel plus, where do you draw the line? And there has to be some places that are going to get more attention than others.
It's interesting you brought that up because a couple weeks ago at a big television conference, the CEO of FX said there's too much television.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There's too much stuff, and consumers are getting confused, and they're kind of taking a step back and saying, maybe I won't be watching quite as much. And there's so much good stuff, and it applies to news as well with BuzzFeed and Vice and Vox. When you have too much video, it's not always a good thing. They're getting into that field because right now video is more valuable than pure text, because television in general is a little more valuable and it brings in more revenue. But if there's too much video, bear in mind when videos only work, when you're consuming video, generally speaking, it only works if you're focused on it. It's kind of a different thing than other types of media. So I do think there's a risk that if you do too much with it, it could have a negative effect, and it could deflate the value overall of video content. It's not there yet, but I would not be surprised if we hit it soon.
Yeah, and also Comcast is working on their own kind of streaming video service called Watchable, I think, and that's which will include, I guess, BuzzFeed and Vox as part of that, right?
Watchable's purely going to be focused on short form and trying to capture the mobile audience. So trying to, going after that mobile audience and going after the same MCNs that are putting their content out on Facebook and YouTube.
And this is something that Verizon is releasing too, some like a mobile video service too, right?
Yeah, I think both. I think AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, all of these guys are looking at how do they get into short form, but they're also looking at OTT streaming. So, as they should.
Yep, it's definitely the time to consider a lot of alternatives. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate the discussion. I want to thank our panel, Alex Weprin at Politico, Andrew Lee at American University, Eunice Shin at Manat Digital Media, our producer, Jefferson Yen. I want to thank our sponsors, NextSpace and NextKids. You can learn more about their program at nextspace.us/nextkids. You can find Mediatwits podcast at mediashift.org. Follow us on Twitter at the Mediatwits. Our past episodes are on SoundCloud and YouTube. And if you enjoyed the show, please review us on iTunes. We'll catch you all next week.